Welcome to this November 22nd special edition of The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We're coming to you from Dallas, Texas today, site of the assassination of the 35th President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, 62 years ago to the minute at 12:30 this afternoon. Well, I landed in Dallas Love Field on Wednesday of this week. I parked my plane just a football field away from where Air Force One arrived at approximately 12 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. Then President and Mrs. Kennedy disembarked from Air Force One, and it had been raining in Dallas that morning. But just as they arrived in the airport at Love Field, the sun came out, the clouds parted, and the decision was made to remove the bubble that typically would have covered the limousine, except it was deemed not needed because it was a sunny and turning out to be a beautiful day. They then left Love Field and made about a 20 to 30 minute trip down to Dealey Plaza. They exited the freeway onto Main Street, joined Houston, and turned left at the famous hairpin turn, more than 90 degrees, it's about 125 degrees, onto Elm Street, where President Kennedy did in fact have a rendezvous with destiny. As the limousine traveled down Elm Street, shots rang out, people fell to the ground. Eyewitnesses, some captured the moment, others hid their eyes in fear. There was one ex-service person on the grassy knoll who testified under oath that he grabbed his wife and child and pulled them to the ground with him because a bullet, the unmistakable sound of a bullet came rushing by his head. That is believed to have been the kill shot. Even to this day, our government maintains the false narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated the president alone. Well, we've been attending the Dallas Historical Society for the JFK assassination, which has now been meeting for nearly 2 decades. It is a collection of people from around the country, scholars, authors, historians, that have done deep dives into the Kennedy assassination. We even got to talk to Lee Harvey Oswald's mistress, who we will have on the show either today or next week. So many fascinating people, so many fascinating stories. The one universally accepted conclusion from this group of people and another group that I visited with across town earlier today was that this was a conspiracy. It was conducted by our government in conjunction with the mob, Johnson, Allen Dulles, J. Edgar Hoover, and then elements of the mob, Carlos Marsala, and a whole host of other folks. I wrote down some of the names. You've heard them all. Giancana, Roselli, Trafficano, and the list just goes on. And so people have talked over the years about, oh, it was this group, or it was that group, or maybe it was anti-Cuban groups. The fact of the matter is, it was most likely, based on all the information that I've been able to distill, a combination of all of those people working not under a written memorandum of agreement, but just an unspoken silence. Now, there was communication between the mob and the CIA. We know that factually. And so there was coordination, but there wasn't as perhaps the kind of coordination that one might think. There was a lot of planning. The assassination was supposed to have occurred in Chicago weeks before Dallas, but that attempt was thwarted. And we don't know exactly how it was thwarted, but one person in Chicago said that they were tipped off that an assassination plot was underway and that someone named Lee had told them so. Well, was that Lee Harvey Oswald? A lot of people think that it probably was. I am one of those people. I'm also one of those people who do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald ever made it to the sniper's nest, let alone pulled the trigger. The fact of the matter is that there was a fingerprint removed from the sniper's nest, and that fingerprint belonged to Mac Wallace, a known assassin in Texas who had done the dirty work for Lyndon Baines Johnson previously when Johnson wanted the agriculture commissioner taken out because he was looking into Johnson's dealings with Billy Saul's Estes and was believed to be being close to spilling the beans and outing Johnson, and also another character named Bobby Baker, who had certain known ties with the mob. So it was a sordid group of people who did conspire, as we all are accused of. The people that have accused people like me of being conspiratorialists were very rightly named conspiratorialists because we were identifying a conspiracy. It was a conspiracy of grand proportion where as many as 100 people lost their lives and were silenced because they had material information that could cause the whole house of cards to come tumbling down. So you'll hear from some of those people today, a very interesting group of people who either had a direct connection to the assassination or as a witness or as an author and a researcher. We also have a wonderful interview with a lady that I have enjoyed following named Jess Cannell. She is a local resident of Dallas, and about 20 years ago, she began to get interested in JFK's assassination. She started reading books. She's collected over 200 books. She's read about 60 or 70 so far, and she is prominently on YouTube. You can go watch her, and she will read to you out of one of these 65 or 70 books that she's read and impart information about JFK's assassination. So a really good story lies ahead for you today. I hope you'll stay with us and soak it all in. And we've got a lot of interviews with some very interesting people. But before we do that, I want to talk about the news of the day. You know, there are differing opinions about how we got here. But Donald Trump, do you remember just 2 months ago, he said, "What? Why are you still talking about Epstein, that loser?" Well, we're still talking about Epstein. It's a story that wouldn't go away. Some people think that Trump was being strategic, and he sucked the Democrats right in, hook, line, and sinker, as the saying goes, and then pulled the rug right out from underneath their feet. You know, Trump said we're not going to disclose the files after having promised us during the campaign that he would, but then he backtracked on that, said they weren't going to release the files, that it would do too much harm to too many people and perhaps ruin the lives of innocent people. And that's an explanation that I can agree to. You know, Alan Dershowitz was accused of having gone to Epstein Island. And the fact of the matter is that he did, in fact, go to Epstein Island. But his reputation was sullied in the process. But what the people that reported on that failed to tell you was that he went to Epstein Island with his wife and daughter. So I think that gives him a pretty good alibi and a pretty good free pass in that it removes the allegation that he went there to have relations with underage girls. So that is just flagrantly false, but it serves as a perfect example of what I'm speaking about. Alan Dershowitz, as far as I can tell, and as best as I can determine, and according to him, is guilty of nothing. But he was Epstein's lawyer, and he did go to Epstein Island with his own wife and daughter to meet with Epstein to plan their defense. And, you know, there's nothing illegitimate or wrong about that on its face. But it serves as an example of how easily someone with an otherwise sterling reputation, you may not agree with his politics, okay? I don't agree with his politics, but what has that got to do with it? Nothing. The fact of the matter is, Alan Dershowitz, from what I can understand, what I can see, has led an exemplary life. He is married. He does have a child. He may have more than one child for all I know. I'm not sure. But he also was a Harvard law professor. We won't hold that against him. And he has represented some unsavory types, like Jeffrey Epstein, for instance. But that does not mean that he is guilty of anything. Everyone is entitled to a full and vigorous defense as part of our country's justice system, and it's perfectly legit. Anyhow, I digress. The fact is that Donald Trump said he wasn't going to release the documents after having told us for 2 years during the presidential campaign that he would release all the files, the JFK files, the RFK files, the MLK files, the Epstein files. And then he backtracked, just like Kash Patel. He's the one I'm concerned about. He went in like a bull in a china shop and promised us the moon and has delivered us squat. In fact, I liked Kash Patel before he became director of the FBI, and now he has turned out, in my view, and look, the verdict is not yet in. It is not complete, so let me hasten to add that. We don't know the rest of the story yet. But what I am seeing is someone who came into the onto the public stage as a purveyor of the truth, and he has turned out to be what appears to me to be the consummate bureaucrat. He talks like a bureaucrat, he walks like a bureaucrat, he acts like a bureaucrat, and for that I am very disappointed. And then there's Dan Bongino. Where is Dan Bongino? I don't hear a peep or a word out of him. And likewise, he came in promising us the moon and has not really delivered. In fact, it almost appears as if he's gone underground. What do you suppose that's about? Here's a guy that I read had to recruit 50 FBI agents from around the country. He had to go all over the country to find 50 FBI agents that he thought would be loyal to him and protect him at his own desk at the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what it will take. I have been saying for as long as I've done this broadcast that this federal government is rotten to its very core. And what I suspect, with scant evidence, but nevertheless, a lot of smoke and a lot of circumstantial evidence, enough circumstantial evidence to convict the whole lot of them, that there is something subversive and sinister at work in our nation's government. I fervently believe that. Why do I believe that? Because I'm a crazed, old, angry white man? No. It's because I have been a student of government my entire adult life. And I have watched, and I have read, and I have looked, and I have listened. I have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a brain. In 1963, I think this country lost its innocence. I think it was the beginning of a slide that has lasted for 50 or 62 years, actually. And here we are. What has it given us? It's given us JFK's assassination, followed by RFK, followed by MLK. Then, and I'm forgetting all of the atrocities that have occurred, but just in more recent memory, we have the Epstein matter. And why are people obsessed with Epstein? I'd like you to tell me in the comments, and if you're on Getter today, we're on Getter right now. You can come and watch our live stream, for real this time. We finally got up to the point where we could live stream on Getter, John Gordon Truth. Come find us there, and you can see my mug on Getter right now, and on Rumble, on X Spaces, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Instagram Live. We're all over the web. You can come and watch the live stream right now. And on Getter, in particular, you can interact with us. You can enter comments. You can say, oh, Gordon, you're full of it. Oh, Gordon, you are just an angry old white man. You are a senile guy. You are a crazed lunatic. Or maybe you're on to something. Because in addition to Epstein, we had someone who took a crack at Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I'm not convinced. In fact, I'm far from convinced that it was Thomas Matthew Crooks. I actually think it was Maxwell Urich, the guy with gauges. Zoom in on the shooter. You can see scars on the shooter's ear. Crooks didn't have pierced ears. He didn't have scars, but that shooter did. And then they cremate the body 10 days later after having washed down the AGR building that very afternoon. They did not preserve the crime scene. They did not collect evidence. They destroyed the evidence, just like they did in Utah when Charlie Kirk was snatched from our grasp, taken from us, taken from his wife, taken from his 2 children, taken from all the hundreds of thousands of young people who he influenced and converted to thinking for themselves rather than being brainwashed by these liberal colleges and universities that their parents have paid big money to so their child can go there and be brainwashed and sold a bunch of baloney, encouraging socialism and communism. If I sound angry, it's because I am. If I sound frustrated, it's because I am. Just like I think you are frustrated, and maybe you too are angry. What are we angry about? And I had this conversation with a history professor that will be on the show later today. We talked to him at the Fairmont Hotel for the other JFK symposium that is going on. It's called the Lancer Group. And he said, oh, well, you know, killing political leaders is as old as time itself, going back to the Greeks and Romans who would kill their leaders, and like Julius Caesar, and all the people that have fallen to assassins' bullets, like Abraham Lincoln. And there were a whole list of American politicians that were shot, like McKinley and Teddy Roosevelt and Governor Wallace. These are people that were shot in the line of duty, but they survived, and they survived to talk about it. But what's different about Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Donald Trump and Charlie Kirk? I'll tell you what I fervently believe the difference was. They weren't, these other people that we talked about that go back to the thousands of years, they weren't killed by their own government. John Kennedy, I am certain, was killed by Allen Dulles, Lyndon Johnson, and it was all covered up by J. Edgar Hoover, and a whole bunch of other people. Look at the lives that were lost just as a result of November the 22nd on that weekend. You would have, obviously, John Fitzgerald Kennedy? How about Lee Harvey Oswald? He was killed. How about Jack Ruby? I believe that he was sacrificed. And we have people at this conference who knew Jack Ruby, who worked in New Orleans, who were familiar with the experiments that were being conducted there to advance the spread of cancer. There is a body of evidence that suggests that Jack Ruby was injected with a very fast advancing form of cancer, and he died within weeks or months of having been injected. I believe that story. I do, because it is all very consistent with the pattern that we saw. So we've got Kennedy, we've got Oswald, if we can include Jack Ruby. Then there was J.D. Tippit. I have not really figured out how J.D. Tippit figured into this, other than there is speculation that whoever orchestrated this horrible series of events killed Tippit and made it look like it was Oswald, even though there is just huge contradictory evidence that would lead a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that would not have convicted Oswald for Tippit's assassination. So let's add J.D. Tippit to the list. Then we can think of Dorothy Kilgallen, who came to Dallas and interviewed Jack Ruby and got home to New York and called her friend and said, I'm going to blow the lid off the Kennedy assassination this week in the paper. She did not wake up the next morning, and her notebook was gone. And she didn't, so she was deprived from being able to blow the lid off the Kennedy assassination. Then there was the waitress in Jack Ruby's Carousel Bar in downtown Dallas, about 10 minutes from where I'm sitting, that overheard conversations between Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald well before the assassination. She went to the authorities and told them that she believed that Kennedy was about to be assassinated in Dallas, that she knew that she had overheard the conversation. She knew who they needed to investigate and to go look at. And do you know what they did with her? They put her in a mental institution. They isolated her. They took her voice away. She was not able to warn anybody or send off an alarm. And then she was later run over on a Texas highway in the middle of the night at like 1 or 2 in the morning. And it was a tragedy. I can't remember her name right now, but I'll get it for you. But so we can add her to the list. And then if you dig even a little bit, you'll find that there were 100 people who were either witnesses to the assassination or had some material connection with it, who died from mysterious causes. Either a suicide like George de Mohrenschildt. There's conflicting information, but at least one witness who was in the house, apart from the guest house where de Mohrenschildt was staying in Palm Beach, Florida, that she heard the burglar alarm go beep, beep, bam. And then the burglar alarm went beep, beep again. Well, I don't think that was de Mohrenschildt leaving the guest house, but somebody did. So the list goes on. It is disappointing, it's frustrating. And there's one thing in common, I think, between Kennedy, King, Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, Building 7. The traces of intel is all over all of those. And when you stop back and think about it logically and dispassionately, aren't they the only ones who could undertake a mission like these and then cover it up? And if the cover-up looks like it's on shaky ground, they just go and kill the witness. And who's going to stop them? Who's going to hold them accountable? And I think that's why the American people will not let the Epstein matter go. I don't believe that it's the list. I don't believe it's some prurient interest to try and be voyeurs in the life of Jeffrey Epstein and the young girls and the victims who certainly deserve all of our support and grief for those who have ended their lives tragically. It's hard to have any sympathy for Jeffrey Epstein, but I'm one of those who am not convinced that he committed suicide. We showed you the video on this show a couple of months ago showing where something orange was going up the stairs leading to his cell, and that's the only thing that was up there. And then he was found hours later hanging in his cell. Oh, the guards were asleep, the cameras didn't work, and oh yeah, his brother said that he didn't commit suicide. He talked to him the day before. He was in good spirits. He was optimistic. He thought that he was getting out of jail. And that is not the mental state of someone who is about to take their own life. So the common thread for me is my strong suspicions with a lot of circumstantial evidence, some scant direct evidence, that all of these national tragedies have the intelligence agencies' fingerprints all over it. And they're the only ones, I think, who could pull it off, and certainly the only ones who could cover it up, and the only ones who lack the moral compass to kill people that get in their way. But here's the thing I can't figure out. And here's what I want you to help me figure out. And you can do it on Getter right now by just going onto the chat board and entering your comments or your thoughts. Or if you're on YouTube or Facebook or X, you can leave it in the comments or whatever device is offered to you there to interact. What do you think is behind this? The thing I don't know is who is the wizard? So you wanted to meet the wizard. It takes you back to the Wizard of Oz, and you pull the curtain back, and it's this thin little man who has a little man, short man complex filled with insecurity. But who is the wizard? Metaphorically or in reality? That's the part I can't figure out. Nor can I figure out what is the motivation. I just don't understand it. Unless it is what I suspect, which is just pure old simple greed. It's lust for money, and it's lust for power, for all the wrong reasons. And I think that it takes, and this is my truth, I think it takes a belief that there is true evil and a belief that there is a Satan. And disappointingly, I fear that Satan has infected our federal government. The degree to which and the severity of which, I don't know. But what I am astounded is that there's not been a day of reckoning and accountability for the people that did it. That is, I believe, up to Donald Trump. He promised he would. He promised he would. Now, I got to believe that Donald Trump loves his family. I know he loves those grandchildren. Oh, my God. When that Kai Trump walks into the room, Donald Trump just beams. These people will stoop to no known lows. So it may just be that he does not have the ability to dismantle the deep state as he told us he would, for fear of retaliation and retribution against not only him, but his family members. And I, for one, believe that's a real possibility. But let's get back for just a moment and wrap up the monologue now with a reflection on Epstein, the story that won't go away. So I'm tying all this back together. Now, you know that Marjorie Taylor Greene picked this issue and this hill to die on. She would not support President Trump and go along with his reluctance to suppress the Epstein files. In fact, she pledged to join with the Democrats and vote with them to pass a law that would release the Epstein files. Well, as soon as Donald Trump read the tea leaves and he realized that it was more than Marjorie Taylor Greene, it was a whole host of people in Congress were going to vote as a bipartisan bloc. And so he went out and said, oh, I'm going to encourage the Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune to pass a law releasing the Epstein files. I guess politics is the art of the practical, isn't it? Or was he being so smart and strategic? And this is the part, folks, that frankly I thought about, and when I heard it, I said, golly, he really is that smart. Well, I've changed my mind. I don't think he was that smart. I think he was a Johnny-come-lately. I think he read the tea leaves. I think he saw what the inevitable was going to be. So he tried to get out in front of it and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to be the leader of the cause. We're going to release the Epstein files, just like I promised you. So who's on first? I don't know. It's really hard to get your head around it. What I think is, what I believe is, that what's in those files are damning, and I think that they would prove that the CIA was in bed, possibly with Mossad, MI6. They were all in on it, and they were creating honeypots around the world to ensnare powerful people so they could own them. That is the narrative that I don't have proof of, except, again, circumstantial evidence. We know unquestionably that in all of Jeffrey Epstein's houses that he had cameras surreptitiously placed in the bedrooms where supposedly this illegal, immoral activity took place, and I believe it. That's what I believe. Sure as I'm sitting here, I believe that our government, Mossad and MI6, had honey traps, that Epstein was working for them. He lured these men into relationships with underage girls. They had relations on camera, and they're owned. And I suspect the list is very long and very deep. So here's the Gordon theory, not the theory. Here is the Gordon solution to the problem. We set up confession booths in the United States halls of Congress, and we pass a one-time law that forgives every member of Congress or the United States Senate who has sinned against God and our country in a way that they are compromised, in a way that they are owned. Let all 435 members of Congress, or however many there are that are compromised or have been bribed, to come forward, confess their sins, and we're going to give you amnesty. You're going to be forgiven. But now you got to come back and you got to do the right thing. You've got to tell us who did it, who corrupted you, who blackmailed you, who paid you off. It's a fantasy world, isn't it? It will never happen, will it? But that's what needs to happen. This company needs a day of reckoning and a cleansing before the second coming. Because if you think this country is the place that it once was and it was celebrated to be the greatest country on earth, I'm going to submit to you today that you cannot be the greatest country on earth if you live a lie and you live immoral, debaucherous behavior. And I think that's what we're confronted with. I think that we've got a federal government that is rotten to its core. So now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trump's most ardent supporter. I met Marjorie Taylor Greene for the first time in Mar-a-Lago. It was 2016. We were both there raising money for Trump. We were in the ballroom. We sat at the very same table for 4 hours, dialing for dollars. And I offered to introduce Ms. Greene to people I knew in Rome, Georgia, where she was running for Congress. She was a pretty delightful gal, a little distant. I thought, well, maybe she's a very attractive lady. I thought maybe she's not being terribly receptive because she thinks that I'm some kind of dirty old man and maybe I have ulterior motives. The fact of the matter is, I'm just a nice person. That's my paradigm. That's who I believe I am. I'll talk to anybody. Hell, I'll even talk to Nick over here. I just met him yesterday, but he's my remote producer now in Dallas, and we're getting along great. But I don't stand on protocol and hierarchy. I just stand on wanting to be a good person and getting to know people, and I'll engage people and chat it up with them, just like I did Marjorie Taylor Greene that day. But she was distant. She was not reachable, was my impression. And I really didn't know why. But I just said, all right, well, you know, she's put off by my niceness. She thinks that I've got ulterior motives, maybe. Who knows? It's okay. Didn't hurt my feelings, didn't bother me. I didn't think about it for a second, but I remember it. And then I've gotten to know her better over the years, and I found out that the person that the first impression I had was the correct impression. I don't know what makes this lady tick. I really don't. I have been nothing but nice to her. I have defended her on the campaign trail with tens of thousands of Georgians. Everywhere I went, I talked about what a crummy, rotten person Brad Raffensperger is and how he tried to keep her off the ballot in her reelection to Congress in 2022, and what a disservice it was to our Constitution, our democratic form of government, and our state of Georgia, and a disenfranchisement for all the people who voted for. And now, you know, she's gotten so big and so important, she won't even return my phone calls or answer my text. I don't care. She means nothing to me. But the point is, that's the kind of person she is. That's the kind of person she is. She doesn't have a good reputation in terms of her domestic life. I'm just telling you the way I see it, folks. And now she turned her back on Trump, but that's not really what I believe when I say she turned her back on Trump. Kinda. But I don't think if you're in the United States Congress, you owe anybody anything except the people who put you there. And I mean those people who pulled your lever, not the people who endorsed you. See, that's the problem with Trump. Trump thinks that once he endorses you, that he owns you, that you are obligated to him. Well, you know, there's some good reason for him to think that, because he is a very powerful political figure. And what he says carries huge weight within the MAGA movement. And his endorsement can get a lot of people elected. In fact, when I ran for Attorney General of Georgia, I was one of a handful of people who he endorsed that did not get elected. We were the exceptions. So what does that tell you? That may be another story for another day. If that was an honest, fair election, I don't know. A lot of people don't believe that it was. I've never said that it was not a fair election because I don't know. I know that 2020 wasn't a fair election. I know that was rigged. And I know the people that counted the votes in 22 were the same people that counted the votes in 20. I'm not talking about my election, but if you think Brad Raffensperger won without a runoff when he was running against David Belle Isle, the sheriff from, I think it was Twiggs County, somewhere in middle or South Georgia, and then Jody Heist, one of the most popular political figures I've ever seen, who was a congressman from Athens, Georgia, who ran on election integrity. And you're telling me Brad Raffensperger won that primary without a runoff? I call utter, total BS. I traveled the state. I talked to tens of thousands of Georgians from North Georgia, as far north as you can get, all the way down to St. Mary's, as far south as you can get, and Bainbridge and Brunswick and all points in between. I met one kid at the University of Georgia who had anything nice to say about Raffensperger. I just don't believe it. I don't have hard, cold evidence, but I have anecdotal evidence that I actually do believe. So if that's true, what else is true? Well, I've kind of wandered around here a bit. I'm trying to get to the point that I think Marjorie Taylor Greene was absolutely justified in standing up for the Epstein victims. But I think that's a ploy. I really do. And all these people who want to rally behind the victims, absolutely. But I think that's a talking point. What the American people want to know is not so much about the victims as we do about the wizard. That's what I want to know. I want to know who orchestrated it, who was behind it, and where are they today, and what other demonic activities are they orchestrating and leading. That's why the American people are not giving up on this story. That's why I'm cheering for Marjorie Taylor Greene. I want her to make that the focus while celebrating and supporting the victims. Absolutely. We care about the victims, but only to an extent. The big question for the future of our country is who was behind it. That's what we need to know. Who was behind Butler? Who killed Charlie Kirk? Who brought down Building 7? Who killed RFK, JFK, and MLK? Those are the questions that I demand answers for, and those are the questions that the American people have to stand up in unison and demand from our government, and that is the truth. And I'm John Gordon. We're in Dallas, Texas, and we're going to start going and following JFK's footsteps from 62 years ago to this day. We will be in Dealey Plaza at 12:30. We're at the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Dallas, Texas, just a couple of blocks from JFK's fateful assassination 62 years ago. And there are a lot of historians, authors, scholars attending the Lancer Symposium here at this beautiful Fairmont Hotel. One of those individuals is a Buckeye. I don't know how I would know that. Andy Keel. He has researched and written about J. Edgar Hoover. Is it too much of an exaggeration or hyperbole to say that he was one sketchy dude?
Well, nobody's been in charge of the FBI for 50 years besides J. Edgar Hoover, and he oversaw, as my title says, he's the father of the Cold War. It's not after World War II when it's commonly seen that, or in textbooks, that the Cold War begins. He starts back in 1919 with the Palmer raids, rounding up communists, and continues that all the way through till he dies in office May 1st, 1972, which ironically was May Day, which is the major day for communists throughout the world.
So how did he cling? I mean, you know, we've seen FBI leaders come and go in the modern era. Trump got rid of Comey. Then we had Christopher Wray, who was nobody to brag about, in my view. And now we've got Kash Patel, who many people are very disappointed in, to say the least. But J. Edgar Hoover survived decades. How did he do it?
He had the files on everybody. I have a quote in my new conclusion as well as the original edition, which was published 25 years ago, that basically he said that Hoover would have performed, he would have defied people. He had a file on everybody. That was on the Watergate tapes in 1973. So presidents come and go, 8 to 9 of them, I believe, going back to Wilson. He saw them come and go, and they were scared to death of him, most of them.
So the thing that kind of strikes me about J. Edgar Hoover, understanding that a lot of authors and historians have said similar tales, but he was a pretty bad hypocrite, wasn't he? He was no saint himself.
Well, that's the thing, trying to pry into his personal life and document it for sure, like a lot of things with the Kennedy assassination, other aspects of history, is very difficult. But as I write in my book, in the new conclusion, he had contacts with people that paid his way in La Jolla, California, at Del Mar Racetrack, and put him up in hotels down in Florida. He liked to gamble, the Gulf Stream in Florida, for example. And I think that eventually they got dirt on him and vice versa. I think his activities with Clyde Tolson, no one knows for sure. There's no film footage that was released to us. But organized crime individuals probably had information or films on him, which is why he, of course, came out and said for years, decades, there is no organized crime. And of course, he's proven to be wrong. And of course, Bobby Kennedy comes in office and says, you know, organized crime is real. He ends up putting Jimmy Hoffa in jail and Carlos Marcello and all sorts of people. And I think Johnson's ties with Bobby Baker and organized crime are certainly documented too.
Well, I knew Bobby Baker had a very bad reputation and a checkered past, but was he mob?
He had ties with organized crime through Clint Murchison, of all people, owner of the Cowboys, meatpacking industry down in Haiti. Yeah, Bobby Baker was demanded kickbacks for Johnson, like for Air Force bases, for construction projects, things of that nature, which is why he was on the cover of Life magazine November 9th, and he had just resigned from his position as Senate Majority Leader's secretary. And that's how he knew all about Johnson and vice versa. Of course, when one more thing, when Baker went to prison, one of his protectors was Jimmy Hoffa, of all people. And then Jimmy Hoffa was released, and then he was pardoned by Nixon, and he was part of that mass group of people who were murdered in 74, 75, 76, which I believe that John, would have been Sam Giancana, John Roselli, Hoffa, Charles Nicoletti. These guys were, somebody was above them, using them to attempt to kill Castro for a while, and that plot might have switched to JFK.
Boy, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, let's go back to the Bobby Baker episode. He was on the verge of bringing Johnson down through guilt by association, was he not? And Johnson was under the microscope.
More than that. The cover of Life magazine, the 22nd, and the next one was going to have Johnson on the cover. And actually, November 14th, Kennedy's last press conference was on Vietnam and Bobby Baker. And he said Bobby Baker's being investigated and there might be others, which alludes to Johnson. So the morning of the assassination, Richard Nixon had just been in Dallas the day before speaking at Pepsi Bottlers Convention. And before he left the airport in Dallas that morning, he said that Kennedy more than likely will dump Nixon in 64. This is in the front pages.
Kennedy would dump Johnson.
Yes, off the ticket. And that means that he'd been in jail, more than likely. Because Bobby Baker actually said in his book, Wheeling and Dealing in 1975, that I took the oath of the underworld, so to speak, and I didn't want to turn rat, because Johnson would have been in jail. Baker actually said that.
So one thing that you did not speak about with J. Edgar Hoover was that he was gay. He was gay before it was acceptable to be gay. Well, he had a gay lover he lived with that was the assistant director of the FBI, right?
Well, there's a lot of people that live with other people that aren't necessarily gay.
Well, except these two guys were.
Well, unless you got
reportedly,
right.
But I'm asking you. I'm not.
I allude to that in my book also. I think that they were, but to actually say for sure that you have pictures, photos, whatever else, nobody really has those.
So that would have been sufficient to bring him down in 1960s, right?
Oh, no question about it. No question about it.
So how did he cover it up? How was he able to slip by?
He was the master of secrecy. I mean, that's, he and Johnson were neighbors across the street for 15, 20 years. So they had secrets together and secrets of their own.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject. If we start talking about Lyndon Baines Johnson, I think he was possibly one of the most vile people to walk the face of the earth, let alone sit in the highest seat of the land. But we're here at the Lancer Conference. You're an author. This is not your first time here, right?
No, I've been coming here for over 30 years, and I was fortunate to meet a number of people who knew Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, his mistress is across town right now at the JFK Historical Society.
Supposed witness.
Do you buy it?
Supposed mistress, excuse me.
It sounds like you're in doubt.
There's no doubt they work together. I've been down to the Riley Coffee Company in New Orleans. I've walked all that beat and so on and so forth. There's no doubt they worked together at the same place. Now, beyond that, there's no photos, there's no love letters, there's none of that to document it. So
I'm aware that is a pretty large contingent of people that think that she is making that part of the story up.
She's embellishing it a little bit, put it that way.
Yes. So you've come for 30 years. You've studied this stuff. I don't think you could study J. Edgar Hoover without studying Kennedy's assassination. It was probably one of the most seminal events in our country's history. Do you have any conclusions? Who done it?
I think it was a combination of people, quite honestly, and I think we'll be surprised when it's all said and done that more of it was done at the last minute than what people think. November 15th, front page Dallas Morning News, there will be no motorcade in Dallas. Just a week later, it changes. Part of it was because of the site of the luncheon speech. Would it be at the Trade Mart? Would it be at the Women's Building? On top of it, the morning of the assassination, Dallas Morning News, there was no turn from Houston on to Elm. In fact, the police and Secret Service didn't make that change till the night before and the morning of. There was a lot of changes going on. So certain elements of the Secret Service were involved because Gerald Bain, the #1 White House Secret Service, his head of the detail, got his first vacation that week. Wasn't there, first time in 3 years. Second in command was Floyd Boring. He was back in D.C. He planned the whole thing. The third guy was Winston Lawson. And there's a lot of changes that were made at Love Field in that morning. And the weather. No one knew what the weather was going to be, especially Oswald.
Yeah, I mean, they took off from Fort Worth, and it was raining. They got to Dallas, and the sun came out, right?
It rained in Dallas that morning, too. But anyhow, no one knew what the weather was going to be. They didn't know if the bubble top was going to be off or on. Another aspect of Oswald's innocence is the fact that when Oswald took the job October 16th, book depository, there are 2 book depository buildings. One was on Houston Street out of Dealey Plaza. He had no idea. He couldn't finagle his way to be in the one on Dealey Plaza on Elm Street. So there's just too many things that really Oswald had no control of for him to be planning it in advance.
Well, I have read about the discussion or the decision on where to hold that luncheon that was to have occurred after President Kennedy was assassinated. Why is the location of the luncheon significant?
Because they wouldn't even have gone through Dealey Plaza. And on top of it, the liberal wing, the Democratic Party, progressive wing, wanted it to be at the Women's Building because it was open to more groups of people, ladies, females, minority groups. And the Fat Cats wanted it at the Trade Mart. But Gerald Bain, obviously he didn't go to Dallas, but he saw the pictures of the Trade Mart and said, we're never going to go there. That was his quote, November 9th, because of the catwalks and the many entrances. Have you ever seen the movie Manchurian Candidate?
I have not. I'm familiar with it.
But in that movie, they sort of depict a similar situation where a guy is up in the catwalks and shoots the president.
Amazing. Well, I was home from the 4th grade with the flu on November 22nd, 1963. So I developed an interest in the Kennedy assassination at the age of 10. Your ability to recall dates, names, and places is it's really impressive. I'm not trying to butter you up. I'm just being sincere. How do you keep all this in that cranial space of yours?
Well, I taught history, advanced placement U.S. history, international baccalaureate, government econ, and AP and U.S. history at University of Akron. So history is sort of my thing.
I bet you got A's in school too.
Well, when I really tried, put it that way. I'm a child of the 60s and 70s.
All right,
like
so
you.
Let me ask you this. You've been coming for 30 years. Why are you here now?
I want to promote my book. That's one of it. But also,
You're a capitalist. I like it. Me too.
It's a story that has no clear ending, put it that way, at this point. I'm teaching history and government. We know what happened to a certain extent. We know dates and names, but how and why things happen. Like right now you have the American Revolution, Ken Burns series that's on TV. That's digging into more details, using letters, using things of that nature. But we don't have photos and films from that period either.
So let me just interject. Let me just interject for a moment, if you would. In my mind, I don't think there's a whole lot more to be learned. I actually believe that if Johnson, Allen Dulles, J. Edgar Hoover, and a whole lot of other people were tried for murder today, with the witnesses still being alive and able to testify, that every single one of them would be guilty of murder and would be sentenced to the electric chair.
Would be accessories, either during or after, or maybe before too.
Well, if they were tried today, it would be under a RICO Act, and every single one of them would get the electric chair if capital punishment were the law of the state, which is a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. They extracted the body from Texas so that there was no autopsy here, and they can control it. It just goes on and on. Right. But my point to you is that I can tell you why I'm here, and you tell me whether it resonates with you. I continue to see the same damn storyline. Building 7, Epstein, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King. Did you know there was a trial in Tennessee with 12 men and women in a civil trial, and they concluded that James Earl Ray did not commit the murder, and that it was a conspiracy that most likely involved our government, and that is a jury verdict.
I was in Memphis a few years ago for a couple conferences and went in all the buildings in the museum, and yeah, I believe that too.
Yeah, so
it's nothing new in history.
Yeah, so then I agree. I mean, you go back to Julius Caesar. I mean,
biblical days. Look at David. Look at Paul. Look at Moses. They all killed people, and they were forgiven. I don't want to get into preaching, but the bottom line is that human nature, all the way back, is like this story of the Kennedy assassination.
Okay, that's a perfect segue to my point. I want to stop it. I want to be a part of the solution and say, that's not the America I want to live in. It is not the America I want my children and grandchildren to live in. When we are talking about destroying the greatest country on earth, potentially. I mean, we used to have the moral high ground. I don't think that we can claim that anymore today. And look at, somebody took a crack at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and in West Palm Beach. And then Charlie Kirk's got more questions than answers in his tragic death. Right. How do we stop it? And it all roads lead back to the alphabet agencies for me. Do you agree or disagree? And can we get the genie back in the bottle?
There's nothing really in U.S. history that shows that we are immune from that type of activity. You just look at Andrew Jackson was shot at. The guy misfired 5 times. Lincoln, of course, was shot and murdered. Garfield was shot and murdered. McKinley was shot and murdered. They shot at Franklin Roosevelt and killed the mayor of Chicago, Miami Beach, 1935. Let's see, George Wallace ran for president, was paralyzed. Gerald Ford was shot at twice. Reagan was shot in the chest. I missed Teddy Roosevelt, too, was shot in the chest and survived. So I can't say that I agree that America has always been this city on a hill. I think we've strived to be that. I think we're doing a much better job and attempts at it than most nations in the history of the world. But human nature doesn't change.
That is a great observation and probably a good one to end on, because you got work to do. There are people in there that want to talk to you.
Well, we'll see about that.
Andy Keel, an historian, and you're just a real guy, Andy, and I appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
And I'm going to come sit in on one of your history classes.
Well, if you're here tomorrow at 3, I'm presenting tomorrow here.
There you go. We'll be back, and that's the truth. We're here on the location in Dallas, Texas, just blocks from where JFK was gunned down 62 years ago on Saturday. I'm here with Chris Gallup. He is a JFK collector of memorabilia and books. He's a great guy. He's got a great story to tell about how his grandfather had a chance encounter with Jack Ruby at the Adolphus Hotel on November 21st, 1963, just one night before John Kennedy was tragically gunned down on the streets of Dallas. Chris, tell us your story.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Chris Gallup. Been researching for about the last 40 years. In May of 1988, I had to write a senior research paper for my high school. And so I was sitting around at my grandparents' house, and I was talking to them about I wanted to do a Kennedy assassination. And my grandfather kind of smiled, and he said, well, come here. And so I followed him into his bedroom, and he opened up his top drawer of the armoire, and he pulls out this Carousel Club card. And course, my eyes got really wide, and I'm like, well, Papa, where'd you get it? And here's the story that he told me. He was a bail captain at the Adolphus Hotel, which is right across the street from the Carousel Club that Jack Ruby owned. It was Jack's burlesque club. Jack would come in all the time and passing out these business cards, trying to drum up business, you know, because the Adolphus at the time, that was the hotel to stay at. So all the stars and all the big wigs and lots of money stayed there, so Jack wanted all that. And so he would pass all that out. He'd walk up to my grandfather, and they called my grandfather Nicky. His name was C.E. Nichols, but they called him Nicky. And he'd go, oh, Nicky, and hand him a card, and Papa would take it and smile, and he'd say, oh, Jack, Evelyn, my grandmother, she'd skin me alive. She'd catch me in your club. And so he'd hand it back to Jack, and they'd slap each other on the back, and they would walk off. Well, Papa always said that Jack was a snappy dresser. He was, you know, shirt was always pressed, and his jacket was always, you know, dry cleaned. His hat was on straight, hair was good, tie was straight. Kind of forward to November 21st, 1963. It was later in the evening. Jack comes in, makes a beeline for my grandfather. Papa said that he was very disheveled. Coat was wrinkled, shirt was untucked, tie was kind of undone, hair was a mess. And he makes a beeline, like I said, for my grandfather. And my grandfather got out, well, Jack. And at that point, Jack reached out and grabbed a pin from my grandfather's suit coat. And he said, God damn it, Nicky, you keep this card. It's going to be worth something one day. And then he flips it over and he signs it. Admit party except Saturday. And he sticks it back in my grandfather's jacket coat and he walks off. Papa didn't think anything about it. He thought, well, that's just Jack being Jack. Fast forward to Sunday, November 24th, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mom, and my two aunts are sitting there on the TV watching the transfer of Oswald. And all of a sudden, Ruby comes in, and Ruby shoots Oswald. And my grandfather had just taken a sip of good Southern sweet tea, and he swallows it, and he kind of shakes his head, and he goes, well, goddamn, Jack. And he gets up, goes to his room, takes his card out of his suit coat, puts it in an envelope, puts that envelope in the top drawer of his armoire, and that's where it stayed until May of 1988, until he gave it to me.
We're here at the Lancer Conference in Dallas. It's an historical society comprised of journalists, historians, scholars, authors, all interested in this common subject of whodunit, who killed John Fitzgerald Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963, just a couple of blocks from where we're standing right now at the Fairmont Hotel in downtown Dallas. One of the great things about coming to these conferences is you meet so many interesting people. One of them was not even born in 1963. He wasn't even born in 2003. But Josh Harris, he's from Missouri. You are a self-confessed JFK assassination expert, are you not?
Yes.
What got you interested? He's 16 years old, by the way. What got you interested in JFK's assassination?
Around the time I was 11 in 5th grade, I watched the Zapruder film for the first time, and that really got me interested in the photographic evidence of the assassination because I was interested in seeing more. Yeah.
So I see you've got a camera with you. Is photography one of your hobbies?
Oh, absolutely. I mainly shoot on film because that kind of stuff really interests me. I like film photography a lot more than digital because there's a more permanence to it, I feel.
So you probably looked at the Zapruder film from an historical perspective, right?
Yes.
And you probably also looked at it from a technical standpoint as well, being a photographer. True or false?
True.
So how many times have you watched it?
Oh, probably thousands.
And how critically have you watched it?
Pretty, yeah.
With a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
So tell us what your observations are about the Zapruder film.
Well, it obviously shows the assassination. A lot of people sometimes nowadays will look at it and either think that it's blurry or just very, pixelated. That comes from the pixelation comes from modern scans of the film, because we're talking about an 8mm film from the 60s, obviously, and what a lot of people don't seem to understand is the film itself looks blurry, and that's because Abraham Zapruder, the Dallas dressmaker that took the film, actually hadn't focused his camera very well on the president's car, which is why it appears particularly blurry.
Well, it's also kind of jumpy too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's because Zapruder had vertigo, and he actually had his secretary behind him, and had a handheld camera.
And gunshots were going off. For God's sakes.
Yeah.
My camera would be jumpy too. How about yours, David? Would it, or Josh, right? Alex. None of the above. Hey, edit that. So my hands would be shaky too. Alex, how about yours as a photographer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you'd probably be ducking for cover, I'm thinking. But he stood his ground and he filmed it. But I guess what I was really getting at, I've talked to a lot of people that have studied that film, both from an historical standpoint and a critical standpoint. And almost universally, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I want you to be honest, but the people I've talked to, and they have some knowledge of photography, universally say that the film's doctored, photoshopped.
I really disagree with that. There's many different ways that they say that it's altered, and actually on Sunday I'll be giving a presentation about a piece, a part of the chain of custody that doesn't make sense, but I still don't think the film is altered. There's a lot of different reasons to think so and think that it's not. But
aren't some frames missing from the film?
From the original, when Life magazine bought the film, the day after the assassination, and when they shipped the film to Chicago to have prints made and everything, and someone, a junior film technician, was handling it, accidentally snapped the film in about 2 places, and they had to splice it, so they had to cut frames out for it to get back together.
Well, that's really interesting. That's a dimension that I had not heard before, but what you're saying makes perfect sense if that in fact was the case. So let me ask you, I interviewed a lady yesterday, Jess Cannell, and she's a YouTuber. She lives in Dallas. She studied the assassination mainly through printed words and photographic historical memorabilia. But she was pretty confident in saying that she believed that at least 2 sections of the film, what film is divided into increments in frames. That's the word I was looking for. 2 frames have actually been reversed in her belief, that the original film shows President Kennedy's head moving backwards violently, and the doctored image shows his head moving forward violently, which would support the lone gunman theory. She doesn't buy that. She thinks that the film was doctored to support the lone gunman rather than showing the head moving violently backwards.
I understand what she's talking about. In the Warren Commission volumes, they had 26 volumes of exhibits, and they printed a number of frames of this Zapruder film, and there was a printing error where they accidentally labeled 2 frames wrong and switched them in order. Some people will claim that it was to make it appear that the head went to the front, but officially, according to them, it was a printing error.
So you're 16 years old. You picked this subject up at the age of 11. That's just 5 years ago. What research have you done? And you seem very conversant on the subject. What is the source of your knowledge? And tell us a little bit about how deeply you've dug.
Well, a lot of my research more focuses on the chronology and the order of photographs and films, and Last year at the Lancer Conference, I actually did an entire presentation on the synchronization of the films of the entire Texas trip that Kennedy was on. And I think it's integral to anyone doing this. They understand how close certain events are to each other, and I think it is really aided by understanding the synchronization of the films and of the photographs.
So this quest that you've been on, so you were here last year, you were 15. That was 4 years into your research. What conclusions have you drawn?
I don't really focus on the whole conspiracy aspect of it. I more focus on finding new evidence, like new photographs, and kind of building up the timeline of the photographic evidence and what we know in general.
Well, have you found photographic evidence that lead you to the conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president?
No, actually. But I haven't really found anything to support either argument. I've actually gotten to interview a number of people that were had cameras in Dealey Plaza, and of course many of them are since passed away, but I've got to interview their kids, and what a lot of people don't know is that the Zapruder film was one of maybe almost 30 films in Dealey Plaza that show the motorcade in Dealey Plaza. There's only 4 films that show the assassination.
And who is in possession of the other 3 now?
2 of the other 3 original films are missing, but we have copies of all 4 of them. There was Abraham Zapruder, as you know, Orville Nix, Marie Muchmore, and Charles Bronson.
So you've watched those films?
Yes.
And is there anything that you've learned from them that is different than what is in the public domain that most people would have read or understood?
Not that I know of. I mean, any person can watch these films online.
So let me ask you this: have you seen videos of the kill shot?
Not any that are out there.
Not any of the other than the Zapruder film?
I've seen the 4 that exist.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
And do they show the president's head moving forward or backward?
They show the president's head moving backward.
Can you get shot from behind and have the head move backward?
No.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your coming on with us, and look forward to your presentation later this morning. Welcome to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We're coming to you today from Dallas, Texas, commemorating the 62nd anniversary of John Fitzgerald Kennedy's assassination, just 3 miles from where we're sitting right now. We're here to attend the Dallas Historical Society's symposium, 3 days devoted to scholars, authors, and researchers into JFK's assassination and all the aftermath that flowed from it. People whose names you may recognize: Jeff Meek. He's a journalist and author who has interviewed many of the witnesses in JFK's assassination. Larry Schnaff, we heard from this morning, and he has particular insight into the mob's involvement in Kennedy's assassination. And then Robert Groton, he is also going to be at the symposium, and he is the individual who released the famous Zapruder film. So this is a wonderful opportunity to learn and to meet some very special people, like the lady sitting next to me now, Jess Cannell. She is a YouTuber. She has had over 500,000 hours of viewers watch her channel. And Jess, it's just a pleasure to meet you. You are one of my favorite YouTubers, and I don't say that lightly because I spend an unhealthy amount of time on YouTube, but you're one of my favorites because as I've said to you directly, you just come across as so genuine and authentic, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So what got you going down this path? I was home from school, and I watched the announcement the president was dead, sitting in front of my family television with my mom at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I was home with the flu. So I got hooked very early. It has... I don't know that I would call it an obsession, but it has certainly been a subject of great interest and frustration to me. How about yourself? What got you hooked?
I mean, I grew up in the Dallas area, so that was a big part of it. I think it's just part of the lore around here. We actually, one of the moments where I remember it really turned on for me, I think our oldest child was in a stroller, so that would put it at 22 years ago. Wow. But we went down to Dealey Plaza, and my husband and his best friend were going to go in and do the 6th floor museum tour, and they had a baby. And so I said, well, y'all just go, because they were in from out of town. I said, y'all just go. I'll sit out here in the plaza and push the babies around. And I did that, and I ended up bumping into Robert Groden way back then, and I didn't know who he was. Just
serendipitously.
Yeah, he was, well, he had a table there. So one of the things that he did after the JFK movie came out was he sat in the plaza for like 30 years and just told people the truth.
You know, I think I may have met him now that you say that, because I went to Dealey Plaza, and I talked to a lot of those people that have for decades stayed there and educated people.
And so that was one of the first moments that kind of clicked it on for me, where I was like, okay, there's something to this. And I got, back then, you know, it was the start of the internet, but it wasn't very powerful, but there was a CD-ROM that I took home, and I started playing. It showed the different photos and the different angles, and I just remember really looking at that and thinking, for sure it's not what we've been told. I knew that, but I thought, you know, maybe Lee did it. I don't know, but that's where I was, you know, from 20 years ago. Very fascinated, but I was a young mom and didn't have a lot of time to dig into it. My youngest is 7 now, so now I get to dig into it.
Right. But, you know, I think that describes a condition of a lot of people. They have a doubt in their mind, but we all want to believe our federal government.
Yes.
And there is such an attachment to what our government tells people that it's very hard to dispel them of the narrative. Now, for our listeners and viewers, if you haven't watched Jess's YouTube channel, she does something that is really special to me. You know, my favorite part of being in grammar school was after lunch, we'd come back into the classroom and our teacher would read to us for 30 minutes, and it was my favorite part of the day. Jess reads books on the Kennedy assassination and about prominent figures in those days, those very dark days of our country's history. You have a very unique way of presenting information by reading these books. How many? I read that there are over 4,000 books that have been written about JFK and the assassination. How many of those do you possess?
You know, that's a good question. At this point, I would guess I'm well over 100, maybe closer to 200 at this point, but you know, still growing for sure. People keep sending me books. I actually had someone donate this year the entire 26 volumes of the Warren Commission, so I own that. So that's part of my collection, and then I've got a lot of the great books. But I'm eager to keep getting more. But yeah, and I think we've read over 60, selections from over 60 books on the channel.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because I've watched a lot of the readings. And you've now kind of morphed a little bit in that you're interviewing people that either have particular historical knowledge, or in the case of, is it Mary Mormon, that you actually went to her house?
I did.
And I felt like I was there with you.
I'm so glad.
Sitting at her kitchen table.
Yeah.
And I think you even had lunch with her.
We did, yeah. So It was her 93rd birthday.
So tell us about Mary Moorman and why she's significant.
Yeah, so Marianne Moorman, she, most people know the woman in the red dress, which is Jean Hill. Marianne Moorman was standing right next to her. She's wearing a black coat. She's in the little grassy triangle that's across from the grassy knoll, and she took what is the most famous photo of the assassination. It was taken right at the time of, right the split second before the fatal headshot, and it was put in newspapers that went around the world. So it was kind of the publicized photo of that day. And it's actually only, as people will ask, why is it so fuzzy? It's a very fuzzy photo, but it was a like 2 by 2.25 Polaroid. I mean, really a rather small, so what we get from it, we get the whole grassy knoll behind. But yeah, so she took the most famous photo of the day, and she's now 93, and she's still wonderful, very clear-minded, and was willing to visit with us that day, so it was such a gift to get to.
Well, I was going to say, what a special treat, because that is history. Was there anything in the photo that was revealing or that showed evidence that people are not aware of or may have only heard through innuendo?
So there's 2 different places in that photo where people perceive that there might be grassy knoll shooters. But again, we're talking about a photo that's this big, and then when you're looking at the grassy knoll, you're looking at these tiny little grade sections. But there does appear to be, to my eye, there's one spot that I think does show a head. It's not, it's not clear enough to make out a face, but it does look like there is the fence, and there's the bottom of the tree, and then there's a section where there's white from the light behind, and then a shape that looks like a head, and it is at the exact place where the HSCA dictabelt recordings, the audio recordings, those audio recordings identified a spot that was 8 feet back from the corner of that picket fence. That was where one of the shots came from, and it was that fourth, it would be the fatal headshot, and that's what the viewers also, like Bill and Gail Newman, and then I just read something that'll come out on my channel tomorrow. One of the women, and Mary Woodward, I think is her name, but she was a Dallas Morning News staff writer. She was there with 3 of her girlfriends, and they were there on the grassy knoll, and she says, I heard a loud crack from back and to my right, which is exactly the place that it's talking about. It's what the HSCA audio says. It's what Bill Newman says. And I think that's what we're seeing in Marianne's photograph. So that's the one that's the most clear to me.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not mistaken. I know I heard this individual say, and he had been in the armed services, I'm not sure which branch, but he was on the grassy knoll, and if I'm not badly mistaken, he said he hit the dirt because he heard a bullet screeching past his head.
I think his name is Arnold Rowland, if I'm saying that right.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, and that's right. You're saying exactly what his testimony is.
Well, is he still around?
I don't know. I won't speak about, I'm not sure, but there are a few who are at this point. I mean, we were just talking about, we lost Ruth Payne this year. And like you, I had held out hope that, would she do us all a favor and really tell the truth? Because she knew, I think, everything. She got on that phone call the day of the assassination before, I think it was before 2 o'clock. She and Michael have a phone call, and she says, what did she say? They say, we know it's not Lee, and we both know who is responsible. We know Lee is not responsible for this, and we both know who is responsible. So I think Ruth and Michael, now her explanation
is
for
that her husband, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
And their phone was tapped because, reportedly, because Lee and Marina had been in and out of their home. So the FBI was wiretapping, but we have the actual text of that conversation. Her explanation of it is, we thought we knew who was responsible, but it turns out he was. I just think that's not credible. I think they knew who was responsible. I think she played her part all these years and sadly took her secrets to the grave, unless there's some sort of revelation that comes out. Maybe she left a diary to be released in 10 years. I mean, who knows, those sorts of things, but we lost her this year.
Well, you and a lot of historians believe that she did have the key. I'm going to LA after this conference to be with my new grandson and our granddaughter and my son and his wife for Thanksgiving. And I really contemplated going to Ruth Payne's house, ringing the doorbell and getting her to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But I guess we missed that opportunity.
We did.
But are there other people living that you're aware of that might hold the key to this that have not come forward?
Well, Marina is still alive. And she, I think, especially with Ruth not being around, I know that I think she's a person who, from everything I can tell, she was not only vulnerable as a postpartum mother. I mean, she had had a baby weeks before the assassination, so she was vulnerable. But it was her second language. So she's operating in a very complex situation, way out of her depth, language-wise, like any of us would be if we went to another country. She was completely vulnerable to whatever threats and manipulation the government put on her. And she had been manipulated by Ruth Payne and Priscilla Johnson. Macmillan later came along and manipulated her and got her to write this book, Marina and Lee, bad-mouthing Lee. And it now turns out Priscilla Johnson, she was CIA, Macmillan. She's CIA affiliated. So when I look at Marina, I see a woman who was very co-opted by other people and manipulated and pressured. And so I think she perhaps is the final key player that could blow things wide open if she's willing to. But I mean, she also has 2 daughters and a son that probably she has to think about, just like all the other,
right,
eyewitnesses we were talking about earlier that dealt with their own threats and manipulation.
So where is Marina today?
Well, she was in Rockwall, Texas for ages and ages, and I've heard recently that she's moved away from there, but I don't know her location. Still in the Dallas area.
So is she remarried?
She remarried.
So these children are by her second husband, or not by Lee?
So June and Rachel June was, I think, 2.5 or 3 at the time of the assassination, and then Rachel was a few weeks old at the time of the assassination. So she was a mother of 2 very small children at the time.
And those were Lee Oswald's
Those were Lee's. They are Lee's daughters. But then she remarried a man named Ken Porter, and they had a son, and I don't know his name. But so she has 3 children. And I believe, the last I heard, at least a couple of her children and her have continued to stay in the Dallas area.
So of all the books that you've read, is there one that stands out if someone wants to go and really get themselves educated on what happened on November 22nd, 1963? Is there a book? Obviously, Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment was sort of cracked the ice, I think.
Sure.
And really took a subject that was forbidden and allowed journalists and people to write about it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my favorite book on the topic, because I think, well, I know Robert Groden personally, so that's part of it. But his book, it's a photography book, and it includes over 1,000 photographs of the assassination. It's called JFK Absolute Proof. And he is the holder. He's not only the person who released the Zapruder film, but he's the holder of the largest JFK assassination photographs and videography in the world. He's collected amazing photography, and I think that's the most comprehensive book on the topic because the visuals make such a difference. It helps you understand what happened. It helps you see from a variety of angles. Things that you can't see with words. But
so how did Robert Groden come into possession of the Zapruder film?
Yeah, I did an interview about this on my channel. So for anybody who's interested, you can see that long form interview. But the gist is he went to work for a photographic firm in New York City, in Manhattan, that did, they were the only company that could take certain kinds of film and convert it into other formats of film. And they did it for the Hollywood, for the movie industry all the time, and they were the only ones that could do it reliably. And they actually invented a way of blowing it up, because it's on 8mm film, which is like tiny. I mean, the strip is just completely tiny. It's a thin little strip of film. And they took normally you'd have to blow it up twice, as he's explained it to me, and so you would lose detail in each blow up. They took out the bellows and they blew it up to 35 millimeters so that it could be studied and reproduced for Life magazine. In that process, the owner of the company made himself a personal copy. And later he gifted a copy to Robert. And so Robert was in possession from 1969 until 1975. And he nervously began studying it, and he developed this program, this format called Grodenscoping, it's been called, where he centered the camera on JFK's ear. Because when you're watching the Zapruder film, the original, JFK's head bounces around in the frame because Abraham Zapruder was unstable.
Right.
And because he's reacting to the shots coming from behind him.
Yes.
And so every now and then you get this jolt, and so JFK's head bounces. Well, Roberts essentially did stabilization techniques before there was such a thing. And he did it by individually shooting each frame, and they blew it up. And so he was the one who had that. And then he started showing it to an occasional researcher. But they finally, Dick Gregory, the comedian, was the one who convinced him that, you know, look, we've got to do more with this. And they went on to the Geraldo Rivera show called Good Night America. And they showed it in, I believe, March of 1975, 12 years after the assassination. And the very next day, he got a call from Congressman Downing, and the HSCA was born from that. They immediately said, because it was so clear prior to that, we had been told by Dan Rather that the head moved violently forward. We had been told by the Warren Commission, because they misprinted 2 frames of the headshot to show violent forward motion. So the American people...
Intentional manipulation.
Yes, the American people had been incredibly given enough evidence to believe that that's what had happened so that they could shush up their concerns.
Right.
But the minute they see it on Geraldo's show, there's just, I mean, the whole audience is stunned, the television audience was stunned, and it changed history because that's when HSCA was born. So it's a big deal. It's, you know, that's why you'll hear a lot of people at conferences like this say we owe a great deal to Robert Groden. It's because he is the reason why those congressional investigations were reopened, rather than us just being left with the Warren Commission.
And to this day, I am astounded by the fact that many outlets in the mainstream media will print that Oswald acted alone as a lone gunman. Yet, a bipartisan committee of the United States House of Representatives in 1978 concluded with 99% certainty that there was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
So why are they still touting the same worn-out, fictitious line? I don't get it, but I do.
We do, yeah.
And I think that's why the American people are not willing to let this go.
It's the fracture in our national story that we all remember. We know it's there, and even young people in their 20s. One of my sons, he's in his 20s, he said, I think it goes back to 63. Just yesterday, actually, I sent myself this as a quote. I'll read it. Brett Weinstein on a podcast yesterday, it came out, he was talking about government corruption. And he said, does it go back to 1963? Was there a coup in 1963? And the people who took power have never really relinquished it? Like, we all feel it. That's just on a random podcast. They weren't even talking about JFK, but we feel, does this go back to 1963? Is that what started all of this? That we just, it's this big behemoth of some sort of deep power that's held onto it? And we don't exactly know who, maybe, and we don't exactly know what they did in 1963 or what means they used to get there, but we recognize it goes back to that, and that's when the fracture began, or at least that was the most evident appearance of the fracture.
I say it's the day America lost its innocence.
That's right.
I know I certainly lost my innocence as a 10-year-old. My mother said, John, the president has been shot. And I remember that moment as if it were yesterday, and I remember my disbelief, the stages of grief. my first reaction was denial, because I didn't know what it meant for the president to be shot as a 10-year-old. That was so foreign to me, and it was before we saw shoot 'em up television and crime and real crime stories on TV. So I grew up with Lassie and Ed Sullivan and the wonderful world of Disney. My, how things have changed.
And right in the middle of that trauma that everyone was having, because I get comments every day from people who are saying things like that of, my mom cried for 3 days straight. But in the middle of all of that was the very first televised live murder of Lee Oswald. And people didn't know how to feel. I think RFK Jr. has said he asked his dad, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? He said, I didn't fully understand it. I think he was 11. He said, I didn't know how to feel about it. Is this, are we glad he was killed or not? And that's a lot for
Now, I'm not
kids
relating to that.
process.
Why would he wonder if it was a good thing?
Well, because his uncle had been shot. And so he thought, is it good that the bad guy lost his life?
Oh, that Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh,
yes.
I see.
After hearing that Lee Harvey Oswald had lost his life, he said,
they silenced the best witness.
is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? But he didn't understand as an 11-year-old. He thought,
Sure.
I feel like this could be good because it's the bad guy, but for some reason nobody seemed glad around me. And it's because you recognize this isn't how we do government. This isn't who Americans are supposed to be. We aren't people who, have government changed by bullets and then silence the story. That's not what we do.
I just think about all the people who lost their lives that day or as a result of that day.
Yeah.
And Dorothy Kilgallen, who I used to watch as a kid on What's My Line, she went to Dallas, came to Dallas and interviewed Jack Ruby in prison. She got back to New York and she spoke to her best friend, I think her name was Mary Smith, and said, read the paper this week, I'm going to blow the lid off the JFK's assassination. And she didn't wake up the next morning. And I think she's just one of maybe as many as 100 people who have lost their lives mysteriously and through accidents that don't add up.
That's a great book recommendation also, is Richard Belzer's book, Hit List. He takes the top 50 deaths that are JFK related and goes one by one through the case and tells the facts and makes a determination about whether or not it's suspicious circumstances. It's an excellent book.
Well, one of the things about JFK's assassination that I wrestled with for a long time is that I could not reconcile the death of J.D. Tippit. To me, that was convincing proof that Oswald killed Kennedy. But then I watched you, and you went to the place where Tippit was killed, along with your now friend,
Mike
Dowfett, and you completely changed my perspective on it. Tell our listeners what you discovered.
Yeah, well, Matt is a really deep expert in J.D. Tippit, and I was really thankful he took me on what he calls his Tippit tour, but it started on the steps of the Texas School Book Depository, and we followed the steps of Lee Oswald exactly according to what was observed and measured our times against the Warren Commission times and found, first of all, that even if you just do that, Lee Harvey Oswald is exonerated just on the time trials. So that's really important because there are eyewitnesses who saw him at particular times that timestamp. And then there's a distance that he has to travel to get to J.D. Tippit. So that's number one. But then he also walked systematically through all of the eyewitnesses and brought amazing research. I mean, he is so well researched about the case and showed from each perspective which witnesses are valuable, what they observed, what they said, what they could have seen. It was just very fascinating, very interesting. He even has the original police recordings that were wonderful to get to listen to. And so, yeah.
Okay, so you cleared up my misconception about that. And the inference is that there was a body double, right? That people thought they were seeing Oswald shoot Tippit, but it was really his double?
Some people think that's what happened, but like one witness, Aquila Clemens, she saw two men. One of them was tall and thin, so taller than Lee Oswald is how she describes him, and thin. And then the other one, she says, was short and kind of chunky. and had black curly hair. Neither of those descriptions fit Lee Oswald. And when you look into the witnesses, it doesn't seem, one of them says he's a Hispanic man named Domingo Benavides, and he says that the person who did it, that their hair was black and that their skin was darker than mine. And so that's not Lee Oswald. So I don't even think you have to have a Lee Oswald double. I mean, it sounds, the black wavy hair and short and chunky sounds more
that's
like
not a
Jack
double,
Ruby
for sure.
than Lee Oswald.
Well, what about the guy that was supposedly also in the theater that looked like Oswald
Now
in the
that's
balcony?
a double. That's a
so
double.
I always sort of concluded that maybe that was the person who shot Tippit, and
Yeah,
and we got the guy in the shoe store who saw someone running
That's
into
right.
the theater.
So I do think it's possible that the tall white man, I don't think the person being described with ruddy complexion and black wavy hair can be who's being mistaken for Lee, but possibly the white thin man. Maybe he ran off in that direction and went to the theater, but he wasn't the one that did the shooting.
Okay, well, you and Mr. Douthat did have unquestionably convinced me that Oswald was not the shooter of Tippit. But then I'm left with this other question in my mind. Did Oswald shoot at General Edwin Walker a year or 6 months earlier?
That's one of the interesting things that I need to look into more, but I'll tell you what I know that already makes me dubious about it. There's a couple of things. One is I've seen people suggest that perhaps if Oswald was intel or an FBI, informant type person, that maybe he was a part of a mission to go and make it look like there had been an assassination attempt,
Yes.
which is why he missed wildly and hit the window frame instead of getting anywhere close to General Walker. So that's one, is that maybe there was an intentional miss.
So at least we know he wasn't a good shot.
Right.
And if he couldn't make that shot with General Walker sitting in his easy chair at home, then how could he shoot Kennedy from, I don't know,
Right.
200 yards away in a moving car? I don't think so.
That's never been a good case for Lee being the one to do the JFK assassination. But the other thing is that General Walker, if you look at what he believed about his shooting, apparently the ballistics, they swapped the ballistics after 11/22/63.
Really?
And so the bullet that he held in his hand, General Walker said he knew Lee didn't do it, because the bullet he held in his hand was, I want to say, I'm not a ballistics expert, I want to say it was like a lot of copper, and so it was super mangled. Whereas Lee's rifle has a completely different bullet pattern that's very clear. And so they swapped out the ballistics, and General Walker never believed that Lee was the one who took the shot. I mean, there's also things like the eyewitnesses said there were 2 men at the General Walker shooting. So there's things like that that just make me think if Lee was a part of it, it was as some sort of intel op to try to make General Walker to be like an extremist attempt.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, somebody capable of murder.
Right.
Where otherwise the story could fall apart. Well, why do you think that unraveling this mystery is so important today?
Well, I mean, I fundamentally, I'm a Christian. I am always for the truth, and I think the truth wins. I think we're all better off when we live in the truth. I think telling the truth is better for our souls. I think that's true on an individual level, and I think it's true on a national level. I think when we live and walk in the truth, we have peace with ourselves. We know we're not storing up hidden things, and I think our nation has a bunch of hidden things that are, if not as a result of this, they're tangential. Because of this, there's been more that's been hidden. Project Mockingbird has made it to where things have been hidden repeatedly, and we don't even know all the things. And, President Trump, when he talked about doing the documents release, he used this interesting phrase. He said, I think it's time for a national cleansing. Do you remember that?
No, but I did not know that. I think he must be watching The Truth.
I want to say it was fall of 2024 when he made that statement, but he said, it's time for a national cleansing. He said, I think it's time.
Well, you can ask our listeners. I have made that statement for the last 3 years. And that's why I think that the Kennedy assassination and the truth about it is so vitally important, because I don't think that we will be the greatest country on earth if we continue to live the way that we are living.
That's right.
And there is nothing Christian about it. There's nothing virtuous about it. There's nothing truthful about it. And to me, and I have our listeners can tell you that virtually a Saturday goes by that I don't bring this up on our program, because my sense is that if we can get an uprising from the American people to demand the truth about Kennedy, then if that is true, then what else must also be true? Like, what happened to Building 7?
Right.
Now, I think that would be a fascinating series for you to launch. Who took a shot at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania? I don't
sketchy.
personally believe that it was Thomas Matthew Crooks.
There are so many weird details around that one, and Las Vegas, and Charlie Kirk. And I mean, you go down the list, and it is
Charlie Kirk, who I knew Charlie well.
Did you?
He was probably, next to you, maybe you, the smartest person I've ever met and talked to. And I don't mean that sarcastically at all. I think you're a very intelligent, well-studied person, and I have nothing to gain by complimenting you. I mean it sincerely. But Charlie, I think, and you both are on the same level. Just like I think that James, I'm struggling for his last name, OMG Broadcasting. That started Project James O'Keefe.
James.
Whew.
Yeah.
James is kind of a friend of mine. We don't know each other well, but we know each other by name and speak cordially. He is brilliant. And so
he does important work.
And Tucker, I think, is brilliant. And I think that the lady podcaster, I'm 72, forgive me, Jess. You know who I'm talking about, the beautiful blonde who Trump clashed with in the 2016 debates. Megyn Kelly, thank you.
Megyn Kelly.
And Candace Owens. Yeah. I'm thinking that if we were somehow able to all come together and stop maybe working in silos, that we could have maybe a national movement to demand the truth. And that's what I want. Not because of a prurient interest or because I'm some kind of a voyeur. I don't care. Really, I mean, do I care what happened at Epstein Island? I care for the victims, but I also care, maybe even more so, to learn if our government had a role in it,
right?
Which is my suspicion.
What does it mean for all of us?
And what does it mean for all of us, our children and our grandchildren?
And that's where, we talk about the JFK assassination, but I have thought recently that maybe I want to dig into the RFK,
yes,
the MLK.
Sure.
There's not as much books about them, obviously. There's not 4,000 books written about theirs, but
there's plenty of scholarly works.
Yes, and they are equally significant in terms of they were each leading people in a way that was inspiring and beautiful and bringing about change. And they were gunned down. And sadly, I think the evidence shows that they were all certainly threatened and manipulated by our government. And I think that the truth about their deaths was covered up. But I also wonder, did our government have a hand in them? It's a very terrifying thought. It's something that would shake everything about our foundations. And I think that's why even somebody who's, like Trump purports to be, pursuing the truth, I think it's still a dangerous thing to unleash.
Well, there's another friend of mine, Dr. Alveda King. I'm from Atlanta, and so I've known family members of the King family. I have a charity that does work in a neighborhood adjacent to where Dr. King lived at the time he was assassinated. And so Dr. Alveda King was on The Truth not too many weeks ago, and we talked extensively about Dr. King's assassination. I was not aware, or if I was, I had forgotten, but there was actually a civil trial conducted in Memphis, Tennessee, alleging that James Earl Ray was not the assassin. And a jury of 12 men and women concluded that James Earl Ray was innocent of the crime and that there was a conspiracy and probably involved our own government. So here is another fiber in the mosaic, and I'm like, if President Trump said it, good for him. I have steadfastly maintained we need a cleansing in America, and it starts with all these secrets being revealed. The American people can handle it. We're tough. We're resilient. We've lived through a lot. We can damn sure handle the truth, and I think it's high time that we get it. I think you and I, and then we'll go get these other folks, need to lead the people to demand that our government be forthcoming and tell us the truth on all of these. And I think that the people that did it need to be held accountable, even if it means ripping LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover's names off the buildings that they're memorialized with.
And the highway that wraps around right here.
And the highway that wraps around Dallas. Please tell me that that's not the highway that JFK was transported to Parkland Hospital.
No, it's 635. It's a loop around Dallas that's named the LBJ Freeway.
Well, Jess Cannell, it has been such a pleasure and an honor to get to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
And you're so nice to spend the time with us. And I would keep you here longer, but you got to go home and cook. She's got 9 children. And I've met them, and I've met 5 of the 9, and they are wonderful, very well-mannered children. I need to know your secret. You homeschooled, and we can start with that.
We did. Yeah, we've homeschooled them. I started out just as a stay-home mom, wanted to spend time with my children. I didn't want to miss out. I had a very strong sense. I actually worked for the state of Texas in Washington, D.C. I was there during 9/11 and got pregnant with our first baby, and I just had this overwhelming sense that I don't want anybody else to be there when he takes it, he or she at this point, I didn't even know, but I thought, I don't want our baby to take their first steps or say mama and me not be there. I just couldn't picture that future. And so my husband was mercifully willing to move heaven and earth. We were at that point deciding on poverty because it was my job that was paying for us to live in DC. So we moved back to Texas, and I got to stay home with our children. So yeah, I've devoted myself to that for about 23 years now, and now I've got a little bit of wiggle room to learn about this and
well,
do some
I think that
podcasting.
child rearing perhaps is the most noble of all callings. That was the role that my wife assumed without any encouragement from anybody. And we have 3 adult sons now who I'm very proud of and love as much as you can love a human being. So we divided the responsibilities. Helen was in charge of entertainment, and I was in charge of discipline. How convenient. Jess, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on The Truth.
Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.